All right, it's counting down.
3, 2. You want to just like sit here and
No,
so we get a good freeze frame?
no, we're
so
starting.
we get, no, I'm just kidding. So
Oh,
we get a good freeze frame on the, because you get those crazy pictures when,
I
on
don't
the.
care. I know what you're talking about. Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
So okay, all right. So yeah, like we were discussing, I guess we can just jump into it. So of course, the naturalist subjective view of morality makes no sense. You wanted to say originally you had said makes little sense. I'm fine with saying, well, at least my view is it makes no sense at all. So I'm fine with just being blatant upfront. Let's go with it. So I had mentioned that nobody can live view, and I think that's an important idea to understand, is that the idea that moral values are subjective is completely unlivable, and nobody my firm belief is nobody actually believes that they're subjective. Everybody believes and understands and knows that there are absolute objective moral values in this world. And for instance, torturing babies for fun is a common claim from people like, I mentioned Dr. Phil Fernandez, I think, has said it. Dr. Frank Turek says that. Ben Shapiro, I think, even mentions it in some of his things. So these are objective moral values that everybody can agree on. And so your view is the opposite, of course. This, and obviously, I'm coming from a theistic or specifically a Christian worldview.
Uh-huh. Well, the first two things you said, and you're going to have to bear with me here. I'm notorious for missing points when I start on one. It doesn't, I like forget about the other one. Doesn't mean I'm not responding to it or ducking from it. It just I forget about the other.
We're just old.
Huh?
We're old.
What's that?
Hey, we are old.
We're old. I'm 40. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm 38. So.
And I'm getting over a mild cold, and I have a bit of a headache. So, the fact that moral claims are common throughout all people and all cultures, and what you're talking about is specifically that when you're talking about torturing babies for fun, what I recognize is that you're pointing out is that there's a certain incontrovertibility to the claim that people should not do that. And I don't think that incontrovertibility would suggest that they're objective. What it suggests two things. It suggests that because it's an automatic assertion that is part of the nature of most human beings, we're simply incapable of second guessing it. And the other reason is because of what's called the third law of value. To deem your own standard of value as unimportant would be impossible, because the assertion that something is unimportant is itself a value judgment. So that would have to come from a standard of value, which is a product of a mind. So the assertion my standard of value is unimportant is self-refuting, because that itself is a subjective value judgment. So my standard of value is, according to my standard of value is unimportant, is like saying, this statement is false, or everything I say is a lie. So because it's an impossible statement to make, it can't occur. So the incontrovertibility of judgments like torturing babies is bad is a common thing only because, or is incontrovertible because we can't second guess it, not because it's objective. That's my response to that. But did you say babies torturing them for fun, though? Is that what you said? Did you give a motive?
Torturing babies for fun is a universally an objective moral wrong.
Okay, is it objective that it's fun?
That torturing babies is fun?
Yeah, is that objectively true?
Whether it's fun or not is irrelevant to the idea of whether it's moral or not. things can be fun but immoral.
Well, it is
So there's no
it is relevant to our comprehension of my position.
So the
Obviously, you
purpose
wouldn't say
of
that
torturing
it's
baby.
objectively fun, would you? Or is it subjectively fun?
Well, some people would enjoy it, yes.
Some people. Okay. Well,
I would expect. I mean, I assume that there are people out there who do it for fun.
right. Well, I mean, the criticism, it seems, is trying to say that anything we do has to have some sort of objective standard behind it. And so I don't know how you could think anyone would find it fun if there's no objective standard that says that's fun.
Well, would even people will do things that they know is immoral, and they will enjoy it.
What?
You would agree with that, right? People will do things they know are immoral, and people have sex with strangers for money, knowing that it's an immoral act, and they will enjoy it.
But why would they enjoy it? Is it objectively enjoyable?
Why wouldn't they enjoy it? It's because it's physically pleasurable.
Why?
But they know that it's an immoral act.
Okay, but what's good about pleasure?
Well, what do you mean by good?
You have the view that morality is objective. I'm asking you, is it objectively pleasurable to have sex with strangers?
Are there objective truths? I think you basically said
this is not my view. Is that morality is not objective; it's a subjective thing.
Well, then how can we?
What I'm trying to highlight.
So I'm gonna
okay. Just give me 1 second. What I'm trying to highlight here is that you're admitting that someone could do something because it's just part of their nature. For instance, having sex with a stranger would be consistent with human nature, that a person might find that pleasurable. You can understand that. So it seems like when it comes to the folly of man, or id impulses, like wanting to have sex or be violent, you're comprehending that people could do these things because it's part of human nature, but not when it comes to being compassionate. That, you think, needs some sort of objective truth behind it. Where in both of those kinds of drives or behaviors have the same sort of element to them, in that they're born of innate qualities that we can't second guess, and they're not really subject to reasoning. So you can't prove to me that it's pleasurable to have sex with a stranger. Likewise, I can't prove to you.
Well, I can prove to you because people do it.
But you can't prove that it's objectively pleasurable.
Well, I didn't say it was objectively pleasurable. I said it was pleasurable to those who do it. Because it is subjectively pleasurable.
Okay, so it's subject.
It's not but pleasure is not a morality. Pleasure is not with morality. So you mentioned my view. Yes. So human nature is sinful. Does that mean that therefore sin is good because it's human nature?
No, because
is that what I would believe?
Okay. Judgments about the good of a thing are judgments about interpersonal conduct, which bear into human compassion. Obviously, we have conflicting drives. There's no denying that. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. The point I'm trying to make here is that you're understanding that certain drives are innate, like the drive to have sex, or the drive to I don't know why anyone would. I mean, maybe a psychopath might find killing a baby fun, but most people wouldn't find that fun. They'd find it traumatic for them. But you're understanding that that's an innate drive, that's caused by innate things that are part of the human character or part of human nature. But you're not understanding that the drive to save a baby would also be part of human nature. That doesn't need a justification of some kind. Now, although it's subjective, it's so common, it's a species typical trait that we're born with.
The desire to save a baby is innate.
Yes.
How can that be a secular or a naturalist view, that there even innate things exist?
Well, you understand that sex is innate. The desire to have sex, that comes from sociobiology, evolution. It propagates the species. You don't understand that that's the position we take on those things?
Well, I know I understand that's your position, but I don't, that doesn't follow from a naturalistic worldview.
Maybe you're defining naturalism differently than me, but.
Well, naturalism as in only the natural world exists, right? There's no God,
I don't think that's
existential being.
But
there's
you
nothing
still have
outside
drives that come from evolution.
Physical universe.
You still have instincts and drives and desires that are inborn from evolution.
What is evolution? How did evolution give you these things? I thought evolution was an undesigned, uncoordinated, unintelligent process.
It is an unintelligent process
that we just described, but evolution doesn't actually do anything.
Okay, but it does.
It can't give you anything.
It does
Evolution doesn't
instincts
it's not
that help the species survive. I mean, your brain's part of your body. So the reason we have compassion, the way that evolved, is usually, well, the process actually probably happened mostly through warfare, because most of human, I know it sounds counterintuitive to say that the trait of compassion get developed because of warfare, but what you have to understand is that most mammalian societies, or like say wolves or dolphins and things like that, they never number more than 30 members or more. Humans are the only chordates other than the chimpanzees that engage in warfare, and warfare is a numbers game. So you need a lot of individuals. You need even the most primitive human society is number 1,000 or more. So to gain those numbers.
So you're just speculating, by the way. I mean, you're just speculating. You don't actually know any of this. You're just speculating.
We're talking about whether my view makes sense. You think I'm speculating, it's fine. But we're talking about whether my view is consistent with itself. So I'm explaining it.
No, I'm just pointing out that you're just speculating. You don't actually know any of this. You just.
Well, I know it from evolution, from evidence of evolution, but we're not talking about that.
How do you know anything?
That's presupposition. It's a different topic.
No, I mean, we're talking about. We're talking about. I mean, we're getting off just morality itself, but
you were asking me how evolution explains why we have compassion. And I'm trying to explain.
Well, I'm saying you said evolution gave us that, and I'm saying evolution doesn't exist. Evolution is just
okay, but that's your view. But this view
allegedly a process.
Okay, but the argument's whether it makes sense, not whether.
Well, so if we really get deep into the weeds here, maybe you might consider it getting deep into the weeds. But evolution. Well, first of all, evolution can't give you anything, but the mere idea that we know anything via evolution it's nonsensical. You can't know anything if evolution is true, you can't know anything.
I don't. Okay, that's again getting into
evolution is a random process.
Getting into precept. It's not a random process.
Well, you're presuming logic and reason. I mean,
it's not controlled by a mind, but that doesn't make it a random process, right? Evolution produces.
Well, how do you get order out of disorder?
Well, evolution produces creatures that are able to survive.
Evolution doesn't exist. It's not a thing.
I don't care if you don't.
It's a random process.
It's not relevant to what we're talking about.
Okay. Well, you're talking about evolution.
It makes sense. That's a different subject than whether they're not.
Well, I'm saying it doesn't make sense.
What's that?
I'm saying none of that makes sense from a naturalistic worldview. From an evolutionary worldview, evolution itself can't make sense.
I'm trying to explain to you what my view is. You're asking if it makes sense or not whether I can prove every single element of it in a 40-minute conversation. We're talking about whether it makes sense.
We got 45, so
whatever. I can't explain. I can't prove evolution to you in 30 minutes. But we're talking.
What?
The human trait of compassion comes about because you cannot control a society of thousands of individuals through a simple alpha male, alpha female system. It's not strong enough to cause a sort of role-playing structure that you need in society. So what you need instead is compassion. You need group cohesion. You need to care about the other members of your company as much as you care about yourself. And human beings we know what the apparatus is, or the structure that enables this in our bodies. We have what are called mirror neurons. People hooked up to EEGs and MEGs will exhibit the same patterns of neural arousal dealing with pain, pleasure, or etc. when they view other people and going through these experiences, as they will have when they're going through them themselves. Also, the patterns of what we have what's called an empathy quotient, which is kind of like an intelligence quotient that measure people by. And the empathy quotient, people fall on a bell curve on the empathy quotient. And bell curves are a biological signature, which suggests that empathy is an innate trait that some people can have in greater abundance or lesser abundance than other people. For instance, penis size exists on a bell curve. Height, skin pigment, these kinds of things. Size of a chicken or something like that. They always exist on bell curves because there's a genetic norm, and then there's extremes that also exist with that. I could say that doesn't make sense with a Christian worldview, but we're not talking about that right now. I'm just explaining mine, how it ultimately makes sense. But the other thing you're talking about at the beginning was that nobody can. What was the first thing you said about nobody can live? Something about
So even in our pre-debate discussion, brief discussion was that nobody can live with subjective moral views. Nobody does live with. Nobody actually believes it. Nobody believes in subjective moral views.
I think you think that because you don't understand what subjective views entail.
Well, I know what subjectivity means. Subjective just means you living within your own personal views of things.
Right. But some of those views are incontrovertible for you. You're incapable of second guessing them.
Well, we're talking about subjective moral. So subjectivity in itself does exist. So people have subjective values of certain things. But as far as moral laws, nobody can live with a subjective moral view.
We do, though.
But you don't. Because as soon as I start expressing my moral views on you, you jump right up and proclaim objective moral laws.
I don't know where I've done that.
Well, you would. If I jumped through the screen and started stabbing you,
okay,
what would you say?
I would force you to stop, or
why?
You.
Why?
Because
who are you to push
your
moral laws on me?
But
who are you to push your moral views on me?
I'm incapable of second guessing the idea that me being stabbed is horrible. I mean, it's not about.
So what?
What's that?
So what?
So I'm incapable.
You don't
of
like
second
it?
guessing
I do.
it.
Well, you're second guessing it. I don't understand what that matters.
Of course, it matters. You're asking me what is it what's my business stopping you from stabbing me or somebody else?
Well, no, I'm saying more, not your business, but I'm saying morally, would you say that I am being immoral by murdering you?
You're not being objectively immoral, but it makes no.
Well, how can I be subjectively immoral? How can I possibly be subjectively immoral? If I'm doing it, I believe that it's right.
Okay. Does it matter? I can't think with your mind.
Well, you said it does matter. You're saying morality is subjective.
Okay. It's subjective, but I'm incapable of second guessing my own standard. You're asking me to think with your standard on that situation, which is impossible. You're asking me to.
Okay, but you're still telling me that I shouldn't murder you.
Right. Which is consistent with my nature.
What?
And not doing that would be
inconsistent
with my
that's
nature.
just your view. That doesn't. Why would you push that on me?
Because it's consistent with my nature. I'm incapable of doing otherwise.
It's objective to you within your nature.
No, it's subjective to me.
It's not your personal view. It's just within your But if we're all humans, don't we have basically the same nature? Don't we all have the same nature? We're all humans.
Generally the same, yes. There are some variances. As I said, there's a bell curve. And so you have sociopaths on one end. On the other hand, you have people that cry over the death of trees or things like that.
We call those insane as well.
Well, they're overly compassionate.
Both ends.
Perhaps too compassionate for their own good is what I would say.
Okay, but morally, is it would you say I would be immoral to steal from you, to kill you, to murder you?
I would judge it as immoral, but it's not an objective statement. You're trying to.
But you wouldn't say that I was being immoral by doing it.
Well, I might use those words, but what I would actually be meaning
because you can't help it, because you know deep down.
I can't help it because I come from a culture that has a legacy of pre-enlightenment thought. So a lot of things that are pre-enlightenment come into our speaking. I mean, if you're talking about, like if I said the cat's up the tree, I'm not implying that the earth is flat. Or if I say the wind is blowing, this doesn't mean that I secretly believe the wind is alive. These are imperfect expressions that come from the legacy of our language. Like if I say that's immoral, it's an imperfect expression. What I really mean is I find it immoral, or I judge it as immoral.
But you're pushing your moral views on me again.
Correct.
But you can't do that.
Sure, I can.
According to your view, how can you shove your moral laws in my throat?
I have said nothing to suggest that I can't do that. In fact, consistently, I've said that I have no choice but to do that because I'm not capable of second guessing my own standard of value.
Are you capable of choosing anything at all?
I choose things all the time. Some things we can't. Sure? Some things we can't choose. What our standard of value is something we can't choose.
And morality is something we can't choose as well.
No, you can't choose it. Morality. Well, there are.
How do you know that? How do you know that? You're saying some things we can't choose.
You're getting into precept again. Ask me how I know things, but it's a little more complicated.
Well, I would just really quick. I would say the naturalistic worldview has no basis to know anything.
Okay, but that's precept. It's irrelevant to what we're talking about. We can talk about that at a different time if you want to. It's perfectly fine. You can have range another debate about precept. I don't have.
Everybody is precept. Everybody is precept. It's precept is necessary for discussion. But we're presupposing basic premises here to say that the naturalistic subjective view of morality, fill in the blank, right? Makes sense, doesn't make sense.
Correct. We're talking about a truth assertion right now. Whether it makes sense as a truth assertion.
And the objective truth does make sense, right? Objective truth does exist.
We're not talking about truth. We're talking about value.
Okay, but we're talking about morality as an objective truth.
No.
Well, that would be my view. Is morality is an objective truth.
Okay. Well, we're not talking about your view. Your view.
My view is that the naturalistic subjective view of morality makes no sense.
Right, and you haven't provided any kind of basis.
Well, I think you've helped me out a little bit.
Okay. Before I elaborate on what I was about to say, though, moral codes of conduct and things like that have a subjective element and an objective element also. So it's a little more complicated than just saying it's subjective. So, for instance, if you were to say, for instance, the closest thing to a society that I know of that ever, whereas it was a norm in the society to kill people just to kill them, was maybe the Mayans. And the Mayans didn't have the subjective view that killing people is wonderful. They did it as a greater good. They thought that the killing would prevent greater suffering in terms of the gods raining fire upon them or a volcano or wherever. And that concept, that idea, is a truth assertion. So moral disagreements often, when they do occur between people, except in the case of psychopaths and sociopaths, usually the disagreement is over an objective warrant, not the subjective warrant that suffering is terrible. That is almost universal, except for a few psychopaths and sociopaths. So if you're talking about the fact that it's unlivable because people have different moral assertions or have different moral codes, usually the code, the way they differ is not usually in that subjective element. The way they differ usually is on the objective warrant part of it. So this is how people have moral discussions usually. Like if you're talking about tell me about abortion or something like that. You both would agree that killing someone would be a terrible thing, but that person would have a different definition of what a person is, which they think is inconsistent with a fetus, which comes down to a truth assertion. So you actually are talking about that truth element. And so you're actually capable of having that discussion with them. But if you both asserted that, if one of you asserted that killing a fetus or killing a human is wonderful, and one of you didn't, you couldn't have a discussion about it. And we can't talk to psychopaths. You can't convince them that to accept your view, because the proposition is not a philosophical proposition that you can change your mind about. It's due to innate qualities of your character.
Well, let me point out that just because people do something and people disagree on things, like people in many cases, people will do something. Well, one, I mentioned that they'll do something they know is wrong, but whether, like you mentioned the Mayans, so the Mayans sacrifice people. So the Mayans believed in objective truth and objective morality, but they happen to act in what we would consider to be an immoral manner, right? But just because they act,
I'm not sure the view that there is objective morality versus subjective morality would actually influence your actions in any way.
Well, see, I'm saying that if you, just because people act some way, and different people believe different things and different people act different ways, does not mean simply because they can't agree on something, in at least in a philosophical manner, that objective truth and objective morality doesn't exist.
That's not what I was saying.
That's, well, no, but many times atheists will say that slavery was once believed to be good and now it's not, therefore nobody can really agree that objective morality exists.
Right.
And that's not the case.
The difference between the difference between the slave traders, their view, and maybe our view doesn't come down to a subjective warrant. They probably would agree.
Well, you actually, it does, because you mentioned it before, is that many times they didn't see these as humans. Right. So they objectively knew that enslaving human beings was wrong.
Right.
And you look at, if you ask cannibals, tribes that everybody knows objectively within them that eating other humans is objectively morally wrong. And so then the pushback on that often is, well, there's cannibals out there. But if you talk to cannibal tribes, they believe the same way the slave traders did, is that the people they're eating are not human. They're subhuman. Mm-hmm. And so that was the basis for a lot of the slave trade, is that these were, and, you know, Darwin helped them out with that. Darwin came up and said, yeah, in fact, they have not fully evolved. And that's, that was really the basis for Darwinism. And Darwinism really helped people that believed that theory. And you can, you know, human zoos and
clearly you've never read Darwin, but
well, Darwin himself maybe, but his cousin, Darwin's cousin.
I'm asking if you read him. I mean, you're trying to tell me what he thought, and I don't think you've read him. In fact, he spoke quite adamantly about what you're actually saying he conveyed, or.
Well, but his cousin took his idea. Well, they weren't really his ideas; they were before him, and really ran with them. His cousin, who's his cousin's name? Come on,
I don't remember.
What's his name? Okay. Well, anyways, he took the ideas and he really ran with social Darwinism and the idea that there are subhumans, and, you know, if they're subhumans, you can enslave them, and you could even eat them. They're not human.
Okay, but consistent with what you're saying, though, the view that there's
is objective.
The view that there's some human, or that we can suspend our empathy because they don't have the same. If you're saying they're subhuman, what are you implying about that? That they have less feeling, they have less agency?
Well, no, I don't. Obviously, I don't believe they're subhuman.
I know. I'm saying that if they, I understand, that.
Yeah, but I'm saying that if you want to enslave somebody, or you want to murder them, and you know objectively that murdering humans, enslaving humans is wrong, what you do is you take the people that you're going to enslave and you you put them, you kick them out of the human race.
Right.
And that's what people have done down through history, because they know objectively doing that to humans is immoral. And so in order to rationalize it, they had to create a subset or a set below, outside of the human race.
That's your view.
And that's what they do.
My view is that they have an internal standard that suggests that rules their compassion and makes them incapable of doing that. So they come up with a truth assertion, which is the truth element. It's a objective quality to what they're claiming, which can be disproven, that this particular group doesn't have human qualities like they do. So then they can suspend their sense of compassion so to do those things. The point being, the element that makes them able to do that is not based upon a subjective element. That is an objective element to say this group is less human than we are.
Well, what would your view be on the eradication of the Jews by the Nazis?
Of course, I'd be very much against it.
Well, just personally, but you don't think it's wrong. I mean, you personally wouldn't do it, but you wouldn't tell them not to do it, correct?
I would tell them not to do it. If I could do anything to prevent it,
Why?
I would.
Well, again, you're pushing your personal moral views on other people.
Nothing I've said
in violation of their
nothing
moral
I've
views.
said indicates that I'm against that.
Well, how can you do that
Okay,
if there's
so
no
let's say,
objective standard?
wait a second. Let me give you a parallel example. I mean,
well, let me say, would pushing individual moral views on other people? What's your view on that? If I get into power and I say, okay, there are objective moral laws and everybody is going to follow them, or be thrown in prison, or off with their head, whatever. You probably wouldn't like that personally, but what would your philosophical basis be for standing up against me subjecting my moral views on you?
Well, philosophical basis, you're acting like it's a reasoned assertion. What I'm saying is that if you made a moral law that I was incapable of following or incapable of disagreeing with, then I obviously couldn't, but I'd be capable of doing it.
Well, you're capable of disagreeing
No, I'm not.
with it.
It depends on what it is.
You wouldn't disagree if I made you do something?
If you forced me, then I guess I'd have to. But that wouldn't mean I'd agree with it.
How can I force you, though? How would I force you?
Say it again.
How would I force you?
I don't know.
What do you mean force?
You said in your hypothetical that you forced me. I don't know.
Well, if it's just a law and it says that there's going to be punishment if you don't do it, that's not necessarily, because you could still violate it and be subject to the punishment if you chose to do that. So there's still choice in the matter.
And I don't know. I don't know where you're going with this.
Well, I'm asking, you wouldn't have any problem with that? You're saying you would.
Of course, I'd have a problem with it if they're asking me to do something that's against my nature. If they're asking me to do something that I'm against, obviously I'd have a problem with that.
Well, I don't know if it's your nature. I don't think it is your nature.
Well, that's your title disagreement. We're acting whether it makes sense. You're saying it's not.
Yeah, but I think if it doesn't.
Let me clarify what you just said here. You're saying it is not within the scope of human nature to be compassionate. Is that what you're telling me? Is that your position?
I don't see where I saw that. It said
well,
that.
I don't know. I thought that you just implied that. You're saying you don't believe it's against my nature to harm somebody. If the king or whoever asked me to harm somebody and I said I can't do that because it's against my nature and I'm incapable of judging that as a good thing, I'm asking you, is that basically implying that you're disagreeing with that? So you're saying that compassion is not part of the human character or is not consistent with our nature as humans?
You can be compassionate.
Okay.
But as far as the moral views, the moral laws we're talking about, my view is my point kind of here is that you would not be able to live consistently with your view of subjective moral laws. And if you can't live consistently with it, then you've got a problem.
But what you're but that's based upon the idea that I can't count for their incontrovertibility. And what I'm explaining to you is that the incontrovertible nature of subjective moral judgments is because we can't second guess them. It's not because they're objective.
You can. We mean you can't second guess them.
Well, I've said that several times.
I know you said.
Can you second guess? Okay, like say, well, an example you gave earlier. You like sex. Can you second guess that?
Can I think about whether or not I enjoy
you logically
sex?
decide not to like it anymore? Of course, that's a little bit of a weaker drive.
You could make yourself dislike it.
You could condition
It's
yourself.
just a physical.
You can condition yourself to, but it wouldn't involve a conscious decision. Could you decide to eat? Let's say, I gave you a choice between a shit sandwich and a hamburger. Could you decide to like the shit sandwich more than the hamburger?
I think it is possible that you could, if you
chuckle, but that's the same.
If you made yourself
about though, you're telling me I can decide to like.
Well, I think this is a two different ideas
no,
here.
They're not. They're the same.
Well, okay. Here's an example. Augustine, right? Saint Augustine was a sex maniac, right? He was a pleasure hound. He pursued all sorts of pleasure with all his heart, right? Before he became a Christian, and at which point he fully rejected sex. Now, how did that occur?
Well, he probably feared going to hell. That wouldn't make it.
Okay. Well, okay. So he was able to basically, as you said, second guess his view of sex. So once he enjoyed it,
okay,
as life's single pursuit was pleasure,
right?
And then he became a Christian, and he said, "Okay, you know what? I'm going to." And he actually went so far as to fully reject sex outside of having children, right?
Okay.
And he said you shouldn't even enjoy it.
Okay. But that isn't actually second guessing the judgment that he found it pleasurable. He also has a concept then of the long term, because he believes that he's going to go to hell if he does it. So he's judging, one, that it would be pleasurable, and also I will go to hell if I do it. So the concept, the idea that he's not doing it anymore because he want to go to hell doesn't cancel out the idea that it's pleasurable. He still understands that it's pleasurable. If he was second guessing the judgment, he would judge that it isn't pleasurable anymore.
Well, he would condition himself to where he no longer enjoyed it.
But that's conditioning, though.
Or at least that he believed it was unpleasurable. No. So he could second guess. He could logically, in his head, make himself dislike it.
No, if he was having sex, he'd still find it pleasurable.
Are there foods that you can make yourself enjoy? I hate this food. Maybe not a crap sandwich, but some other sort of food that you hate. You can make yourself learn to like them.
Right. That through conditioning. But conditioning,
okay, but it's still part of that is a logical process. I'm going to make myself enjoy this. I am going, and you can. People have been known to, when they're cold, to through the mind. Now you would say the brain, but they would make themselves. No, that I have an issue with as well. But they would make themselves feel as if they're warm, and they would tell their body that they're warm, and they would be able to follow through with that. It's just the logical process.
With limitations. They can't keep doing
that. I mean, I'm sure there's limitations, but some people stay in ice
for
days.
So, but if that process were that easy, then we wouldn't need anesthetics, because it
doesn't matter if it's easy or not.
Well, we wouldn't need anesthetics. Like if you put somebody on operating table, you just say, you can choose to enjoy. We're not going to put you under. We're going to cut you open, and you can just choose to enjoy what we're doing to you. Since it's subjective, that being cut open with a scalpel down the middle is painful.
So we're talking about physical properties here. But just to get back,
this is a physical thing, though. Ethics are a form of aesthetic. So the judgment
ethics are not a physical property at all.
It's an aesthetic. Judging something wrong is the same sort of judgment as judging something beautiful or tasty or wise.
Absolutely not at all.
Yes,
not at all.
Of course it is.
Well, that would be your worldview. Well, but I don't think anybody actually believes that.
Okay.
When I say believes that,
a value judgment is rooted in a standard of value. And a standard of value is a quality of a mind. This goes for all value
It
judgments.
depends on what the value judgment you're talking about is.
So you're saying,
whether or not
so
I
you're
like
saying that
rice
works for all value
is something
judgments.
within the mind.
You're saying that that works for all types of value judgments: beauty, taste, pleasure, pain, those kinds of things. But morality is in a separate category. What suggests that to you?
Yes, because there is an objective moral standard.
But you're just saying that. I'm asking what suggests
based
it.
on the work. Well, there is an objective moral standard that whether or not people agree on it or not doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So murder, for instance, is objectively morally wrong.
So that's
and everybody understands that.
So you're appealing to
and believes that.
So you're appealing to ignorance now. You're saying because I can't prove it's not there, that means it is.
Well, no, everybody understands that, and everybody acts upon that. Everybody actually believes that.
They act upon
incontrovertible
assertions.
To disagree with that.
It's in it, eating a shit sandwich versus a hamburger is an incontrovertible assertion too. That doesn't mean, and every single culture on earth would prefer a hamburger over a shit sandwich. Every single culture on earth has 10 fingers. That doesn't make 10 fingers.
Well, you're talking about, you're talking about something, a Kraft sandwich is on its basis, the physical properties, which is all you should be concerned with, is the physical properties of that versus
I'm concerned with
sandwich.
The taste. We're talking about the taste of it.
It would taste differently to different people, but it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. This is a physical thing.
I'm explaining to you why it matters. It matters because
it's a physical thing, and and we can see it as it hits the tongue. You have taste buds, goes to the brain, tells you what it tastes like. But that's subjective to different people. That is a value judgment.
I'm talking about the subjective judgment. It is subjective to say a shit sandwich tastes better, tastes worse than a hamburger. It is subjective.
Yes, but that has nothing to do with morality, because morality is something that exists outside of the natural world.
We're talking about whether my view makes sense.
You're talking about things that exist in the physical world.
We're talking about whether my view makes sense.
Everybody talks about good and evil. I mean, you even mentioned the good.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So what is the good?
We've already went over this. Our language has a legacy of pre-Enlightenment thought. When I say something is good, I actually mean that I find it good. Value judgments just mean thumbs up or thumbs down in some context. Beautiful, ugly, tasty, yucky, good, bad, right, wrong. We have a standard of value.
Right, wrong lives in a different standard than just value judgments. So subjective value, how much I'll pay for an item versus whether or not it's right or wrong to kill somebody.
What do you mean by just value judgments? What do you mean by just?
Well, a value judgment is just what am I willing to pay for something? That's something that I can decide within my own mind.
A value judgment is an assertion about the value of something. But I'm asking you, why would you say just?
Yes. So a value judgment is a subjective assertion about what I believe the value of a product is, the beauty of an individual is.
Right.
Those are clearly subjective values, but they don't have anything to do with morality. Morality itself is something that exists outside of the human mind.
I understand.
Above and beyond. And everybody believes that. Everybody believes there is a standard, and you yourself, if you were in a situation, would act as if that were the case. If I were to come over and start killing you, you would believe that you would try to assert your self-defense or something, and you would believe it would be morally wrong. So if I were to kill your neighbor, you would believe that that would be morally wrong. You wouldn't just say, oh, well, I don't really like that, but who am I to judge?
I would judge it as wrong, and I would be incapable of second guessing that judgment, and I would act upon it.
But you wouldn't do anything.
Consistent with my nature.
You're saying you wouldn't do anything about it.
What's that?
You wouldn't do anything. You wouldn't do anything about it.
Why wouldn't I do something about it?
Why? Why would you do something about it? It's not wrong. It's not wrong. It's just something you didn't like. It was not preferable to you.
With my nature to not do something about it. Because I am compassionate.
Well, you're saying nature okay. So you're saying nature is an objective truth. Your nature is an objective truth that exists outside of your mind.
Yes.
What is that nature? Where do you get the nature from? What is that nature?
Evolution.
Self-preservation.
Causes.
Well, evolution doesn't. But evolution doesn't give you anything.
Evolution causes human instincts. I tried talking about
Evolution
this earlier, and you
doesn't cause
just
anything. Evolution doesn't give you anything. Evolution doesn't exist.
You only got
It's
60
just
minutes left.
what you call a process.
We only got 60 minutes left. We'll pick this up next time. It was nice talking to you, even though we kept interrupting each other. Actually, I interrupted you maybe a little more than me. But we can schedule this again if you'd like to. But next time, we're going to go over the other side.